Hello, and welcome back to the Crime Reel. For today's true crime narration, we shall be revisiting American Independence Day in 1954 to look at the controversial case of Sam and Marilyn Sheppard. Samuel Holmes Sheppard was born on the 29th of December 1923 in Cleveland, Ohio. He was the third son born to Richard and Ethel Sheppard. Richard was a prominent doctor who founded the Bayview Hospital in Cleveland. He encouraged his three sons to follow him into the medical profession. Samuel, who was known as Sam, attended the Cleveland Heights High School, where he excelled both athletically and academically. He was a popular member of the school and became class president for 3 years. It was at this high school that he met his future wife, Marilyn. Despite being offered numerous sporting scholarships, he chose to follow his father and brothers and pursue a career in medicine. He graduated from the Los Angeles Osteopathic School of Physicians and Surgeons, where he obtained his Doctor of Osteopathic Medicine degree. Sam went on to complete his internship and residency at the Los Angeles County General Hospital, where he specialized in neurosurgery. He then returned to Ohio, where he began working at his father's medical practice at Bayview Hospital. Marilyn Sheppard was born in Cleveland on the 14th of April 1923. She was the only child of Thomas and Dorothy Reese. Marilyn's mother, Dorothy, died at the age of 27 when Marilyn was just 4 years old. Her father, Thomas, later remarried. Marilyn was bright and did well at school, and once she graduated from Cleveland Heights High School, she attended Skidmore College in New York. Sam and Marilyn maintained their relationship despite the distance between them, and on 21st of February 1945, the two were married in Hollywood, California. When the couple moved back to Ohio, they purchased a beautiful home on the banks of Lake Erie. Sam was a well-paid doctor, and Marilyn settled into her life as a doctor's wife. The couple owned 2 luxury cars, had a wide circle of friends, and would spend their free time playing golf and water skiing. In 1947, Marilyn gave birth to their first child, a son who they named Sam Jr. From the outside looking in, it would seem that their lives were perfect. In the summer of 1954, 31-year-old Marilyn discovered that she was pregnant with their second child. Still in the early stages of her pregnancy, the couple had told only a few family members and close friends. Saturday the 3rd of July 1954 was a hot sunny day in Cleveland, and to celebrate the holiday weekend, Sam and Marilyn invited their neighbours, Don and Nancy Ahern, over for the evening. Just after midnight, the neighbours left Sam and Marilyn's house. Sam had fallen asleep in the living room watching a late-night film, so Marilyn left Sam to sleep on the sofa and went upstairs to bed. Their 7-year-old son, Sam Jr., had already been asleep for hours. Sometime in the early hours of the 4th of July, Sam was awoken by Marilyn frantically calling his name. He rushed upstairs to see what was wrong and saw someone wearing a light-coloured top struggling with Marilyn. Sam was then struck and lost consciousness. When he came to, he found himself lying on the floor. Marilyn was on the bed covered in blood. Sam felt for a pulse but found nothing. Marilyn was already dead. Sam immediately ran to the next bedroom to check on their son. Sam Jr. was still fast asleep. Hearing a noise downstairs, Sam rushed down and saw that the back door of his house was open. He could see someone running towards the lake. Sam gave chase, and closing in on the figure, he jumped to grab them, and a struggle followed. During this struggle, Sam once again lost consciousness. When Sam came round, he immediately went back to the house, where, feeling disorientated and confused, he phoned his neighbour, Spencer Houck, who was also the mayor of Bay Village. Spencer and his wife Esther immediately rushed to Sam's aid. Upon arriving at the house, they found Sam badly injured and Marilyn's body and called the Bay Police Department. The police arrived shortly afterwards. briefly questioned Sam before he was taken away to the Bayview Hospital for treatment. He had a fractured vertebrae in his neck, multiple cuts and bruises, and a chipped tooth. Sam Jr., who had slept through the entire ordeal, was quickly removed from the house to stay with Sam's brother. The investigation which followed was problematic from the start. People from the local neighbourhood were asked to look around to see if they could find anything related to the crime. Mayor Spencer Houck's 16-year-old son Larry found Sam's medical bag between the house and the beach. The contents of this bag, along with numerous items from the house, were disturbed before they could be checked for fingerprints. At 8 a.m. that morning, the coroner, Samuel Gerber, arrived at the scene. Marilyn's time of death was estimated to be between 3 and 4 a.m. She had sustained approximately 35 injuries to her head. Bay Police called in the Cleveland Police Homicide Department to assist with the case. This brutal crime in a safe residential neighbourhood immediately dominated the news headlines. The Homicide Division started to question Sam's version of events. They noted that there was no evidence of a break-in at the house, and the t-shirt which Sam had been wearing when he had fallen asleep on the sofa was now missing. Questions were asked as to how 7-year-old Sam Jr. managed to sleep through such a brutal attack. As the police continued to investigate the Sheppard family, they discovered that things were not as picture perfect as they may have seemed. Sam had been having an affair with a nurse by the name of Susan Hayes for over 3 years. Marilyn was aware of his infidelity and was very unhappy, although it was believed that the couple were trying to work through their issues. Unknown to the general public at the time, Cleveland Police recommended to the Bay Police Department that Sam should be arrested on the day of the murder. However, the mayor, who had been the first to arrive at the scene and was also a friend of Sam's, along with the police chief, were reluctant to do so. Just 3 days later, on Tuesday the 7th of July, Marilyn's funeral took place. Sam attended the funeral in a wheelchair due to the extent of his injuries. Despite the brief initial wave of public sympathy for Sam, the press started to blame him for the murder and called for him to be arrested. Sam was well enough to give a full statement to the police on the 10th of July. He retold the information which he had briefly provided in the hours directly after the murder. Additionally, he stated that he saw a middle-aged man wearing a light-coloured garment. The man was approximately 6'3" tall with dark bushy hair. With increasing pressure from the press, who perceived Sam not being arrested by this point as an outrage, the coroner, Samuel Gerber, announced that an inquest would be held. It was held in the auditorium of the local elementary school and was packed full of spectators, television reporters, and radio crews. Due to this not being an official legal proceeding, Sam's lawyer, William Corrigan, was not allowed to participate. William advised Sam not to answer any questions, as was his Fifth Amendment right, but Sam answered them regardless, declaring that he had never had a sexual relationship with Susan Hayes. The following day, the newspapers ran a story from Susan, who confirmed that she and Sam had been having an affair for over 3 years. Sam was arrested at his father's house the following day and was then subjected to intensive questioning by multiple detectives over a 3-day period. Whilst the detectives repeatedly tried to catch Sam in a lie or get him to confess, Sam maintained his innocence throughout this period. Sam was then charged with Marilyn's murder. He was refused bail. Jury selection started on the 8th of October 1954 and lasted almost a month. Despite requests to move the trial and delay it until the huge amount of local negative publicity had died down, the trial still went ahead in Cleveland. At the trial, Nancy Ahern, who spent the evening of 3rd of July with the Sheppards, testified that Marilyn had been considering divorcing Sam because she was aware of his affair with Susan. Susan also testified on behalf of the prosecution, providing details of her and Sam's 3-year affair. The defence began presenting their case on December the 2nd. Sam's brother Steve noted that a cigarette had been found floating in an upstairs toilet at the Sheppard's home, despite neither of them smoking. They took this as proof of an intruder, but the cigarette had never been entered into evidence. The defence also presented details of the injuries that Sam sustained that evening, as well as eyewitness accounts of a man in the area fitting Sam's description of his attacker. Sam testified and confessed to an affair with Susan, but stated that he and Marilyn had never talked about divorce and were dealing with their problems. Sam's lawyer told the jury that his client had been trialled by a newspaper and the evidence simply wasn't sufficient for a guilty conviction. Jury deliberations started on December the 17th and took around 100 hours. On December the 21st, 1954, Sam was found not guilty of first-degree murder, but guilty of murder in the second degree. He was sentenced to life in prison. The consequences of that night continued to affect all around. 2 weeks after the verdict was announced, on January the 7th, 1955, Sam's mother left a note stating that she just couldn't go on before killing herself with a shot to her head. On 18th of January 1955, 11 days after his mother's suicide, Sam's father died from a hemorrhaging gastric ulcer. Sam and his brothers believed that this was caused by the stress of the murder, trial, and his wife's suicide. Sam's lawyer, William, continued to work on Sam's appeals, but died in 1961. Marilyn's father, Thomas, died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound on the 13th of February 1963. He left a note simply saying, "I'm tired of it all. Goodbye." Sam's family instructed a new lawyer, a celebrity attorney by the name of F. Lee Bailey, who is best known for representing O.J. Simpson. Bailey was relentless in getting the original court case reviewed. On July the 16th, 1964, it was determined that there had been 5 separate violations of Sam's constitutional rights. This made due process impossible. Sam's conviction was overturned and he was released from prison. Within days of Sam's release, he remarried. During his time in prison, he had started conversing with and then being visited by a lady by the name of Ariane Teben-Johans. Ariane had been outraged by Sam's conviction and donated to the campaign to help free him. However, less than a year later, a federal appeals court voted to reinstate Sam's conviction. Sam was allowed to remain free until his appeal was heard at the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court delivered their decision on the 6th of June 1966. Due to the massive publicity surrounding the case, Sam had never received a fair trial. 12 years after the murder of his wife, Sam was officially an innocent man, but then faced the prospect of a new trial. On November the 1st, 1966, the new trial began. This time, the defence presented arguments that Marilyn had been killed by a left-handed person and also noted that there was a spot of blood belonging to someone else at the scene. Sam's lawyer, F. Lee Bailey, suggested that the murder may have been committed by Spencer and Esther Houck, their motive being that Marilyn had been having an affair with Spencer. Sam did not testify at this trial. It was later revealed that this was because his mental health had deteriorated badly and he had become addicted to both alcohol and prescription medicine. Jury deliberations began on the afternoon of Friday, November the 16th. By 9:30 p.m. that evening, the jury returned their verdict: not guilty. Despite now being fully cleared of any charges against him and being allowed to return to medicine, Sam's life deteriorated rapidly. With his addiction spiralling out of control, his skills as a surgeon were severely impaired. Within months, 2 patients had died during surgeries as a result of his carelessness. He was sued for medical malpractice and resigned from medicine. In December 1968, Ariane filed for divorce, stating that Sam's alcohol and drug addiction had led to him stealing her money and being physically abusive towards her. The following year, in 1969, in a strange turn of events, Sam became a pro wrestler. His wrestling name was Killer Sheppard. At the age of 46, it is believed that he then married the 20-year-old daughter of his wrestling manager, although this is unconfirmed. Less than a year later, on 6th of April 1970, Sam was found dead in his home. He had died from liver failure and was virtually penniless at the time. Sam and Marilyn's son, Sam Jr., was raised by his Uncle Stephen and his wife, and has always believed that his father was innocent. With his father being found not guilty of his mother's murder, Sam Jr. wanted someone to be held accountable for his mother's death. In 1989, a man by the name of Richard Eberling was convicted for an unrelated murder. Richard was 25 at the time of Marilyn's murder and ran a small window cleaning company whose clients included Sam and Marilyn Sheppard. Richard knew Marilyn and would often stop for a chat when cleaning her windows. 5 years after Marilyn's murder, Richard was arrested on a separate theft charge, and police found a ring belonging to Marilyn in his possession. Questions were asked as to whether the unidentified blood drop in the house belonged to Richard, a fact which he confirmed when he claimed to have cut his hand when cleaning the windows a couple of days prior to the murder. Over time, Richard gave various confessions, denials, and false information concerning Marilyn's murder. It may have been that he simply enjoyed the notoriety of being falsely associated with this high-profile crime, but many believe that finding the blood of a now convicted murderer at the Sheppard home is a coincidence too great to ignore. In October 1995, the Sheppard family filed a wrongful imprisonment suit. Ultimately, there was not enough evidence to state that Sam was innocent, and the lawsuit was unsuccessful. Richard died in prison on the 25th of July 1998. Sam Jr. remains convinced of his father's innocence. However, now that all of the main parties involved have died and all legal routes have been exhausted, it is unlikely that we will ever be truly certain what happened on that holiday weekend in 1954. That concludes the story of Sam Sheppard. Thank you very much for listening. Please add any comments down below. For those people interested, there is a made-for-TV show, Guilty or Innocent, the Sam Sheppard murder case. I received many kind comments from people. I just wanted to say a personal thanks to a couple that have recently been very well received by myself. Thank you Poop Snoot, and thank you Widowmaker. I want to introduce you to Sophie Fisher. She's aged 8. She came from a German Shepherd dog rescue. Since then she has embarked on a crime spree with dogged determination. I didn't write this, by the way. Sophie's mum, Madeline, did. She shows no remorse for her actions and looks set to become a notorious thief. And in the pictures you can see her running with a stolen ball and then holding that ball to ransom, demanding bacon and cheese in return for its freedom. Unconcerned by her criminal record, she brazenly sleeps on her back for all the world to admire. Great script if you thought of doing crime writing, Madeline. Thanks for sending that in to me. Thanks very much for listening to The Crime Reel. Stay safe. Goodbye. Psst. We haven't had a competition in a while, have we? If you'd like to win this script, please add the words comp or competition. I'll pick a winner in a week's time and contact you. Goodbye.